So I wonder this morning, do you wake up with a sense of destiny on your life? Do you wake up with a sense of calling on your life when you wake up? And if you don't, why? Why don't you wake up with a sense of destiny or a sense of calling every time you wake up? Is it just for a few people? Are we all just left, we're just over here eating pizza? And the heroic acts and the things we see, that's just for a special few. If you think that way, I want to challenge you with why. Because as we read the scriptures, I see over and over again that God continues to work with people who say yes, who want to work with him, and no matter what our starting point, he takes our faithfulness, he takes our availability, and he uses us, and he works with us, and we get to work with him to really make the world he's always imagined. A world filled of love and peace and hope and joy. We get to participate all the time with God. And so today I want to talk about callings. And how do you find callings? Does God just choose people? Lightning bolt hits your car, spins over in the water and in slow motion, and the crystals come and you become this new heroic being and you emerge from the water. How does God actually choose people and find people and call people? And today I want to challenge you that when I read the scriptures, oftentimes callings can be found in the midst of hardships and tragedy. We've been reading through the Bible. All you see is hardships and tragedies and hardships and tragedies. It was never easy, and it's never been easy, and the world will never be easy for people. But I want to encourage you today. I think you can find calling in the midst of any hardship or tragedy you may be going through right now. See, right now I want to ask this question. Are you living your life right now and feel like you have a shattered dream? Right now, are you experiencing some kind of a shattered dream? Something you've always dreamed about, imagined, and you're looking at your life now and saying, never happened. Or maybe you're living and walking through something right now. It's not the life you've imagined you'd be living. Whenever you find yourself in the midst of shattered dreams, I want to encourage you, remind you of the tale and the legend of Daniel. The book of Daniel is a book of shattered dreams. If you don't know who Daniel is, he grew up in a family of nobility. He grew up, in the palace. And when you're growing up in the palace, man, you got opportunities. You're talking about freedoms that most people don't have. Opportunities. Think about the things he dreamed about, talked with his friends about, the lives that they were going to live. But there was a big problem in Judah. See, the leaders were choosing to do things that did not honor God. The leaders of the nation of Israel and Judah, the leaders were doing things that were actually hurting people. And God is never okay with people hurting people. So God does what he does. Just like a parent would discipline a child, God says, listen, you guys are not stopping what you're doing. And you're supposed to be representing me, so we're going to have to let reality be a teacher. And so in those days, what God chose, he said, I'm going to have another country come, and they're going to come and destroy this city unless you change your ways. Unless you change your ways, they're going to come and they're going to take some of the people living here captive and as slaves in exile, and they're going to serve under another king. And they won't have any options. So unless you change and turn from your ways, this is going to happen. And often in Scripture, you see God gives us chances to change. But God's not okay with us hurting people or doing things that are going to be harmful. So sometimes he lets reality be a teacher, and he uses those things to hopefully change our hearts. And when those things happen, we can put up a fist to God, or we could say, you know what? I got some things I got to work on. If you've never experienced that, I experience it all the time. God's always working on me. Just when you think you got everything together, there's another layer. In fact, when you're a husband and a parent, wow, you're constantly realizing, I failed. I got to keep on working on this. And I will always keep on working on it. So in Daniel 1, we'll read about this. Daniel and his friends were taken in this first wave. So this nation Babylon comes, takes Daniel, takes the city, takes his friends. And in Daniel 1:3 it says, the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. It goes on to say, select only the strong, healthy, good-looking men, he said. Make sure they are well versed in every branch of learning. They are gifted with knowledge and good judgment and are suited to serve in the royal palace. And train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. And they were to be trained for 3 years, and then they were to enter the royal service. Daniel's dreams are now shattered. That promotion maybe they were hoping for in the royal palace, they didn't get. The promotion they thought they were eligible for, never got it. That raise they were hoping for, they worked hard for, didn't get it. They had freedoms taken. They had opportunity taken. And now their life would never be the same. But it actually gets darker. It gets darker than this. In that passage we just read, it said, choose the strong, healthy, and good-looking men. Well, what do strong, healthy, good-looking men do? I'm looking at them in the room. And older men, too. You know. They talk about their futures, their wives. Do you want to get married? Yeah. Who do you like in the palace? Oh, my eyes are on this. They would be talking about relationships and getting married and then dreaming about families and families of their own. And I can't wait to have my own kids and my own families. And maybe they'll come and live in the palace. Or maybe we'll make enough money. We'll buy a plot of land and have our own little place. Imagine the dreams they were talking about of getting married or having a family. You know what's interesting about strong, healthy young men? Kings in those days, they had multiple wives and multiple concubines. So would kings in those days who have multiple wives, multiple concubines, who they can't keep an eye on all the time, and now they got strong, healthy young men working in the palace. Well, they had to take care of something. They weren't going to have it. In fact, it's talked about in 2 Kings 20. It says, some of your very own sons will be taken away into exile, and they will become eunuchs who will serve in the palace of Babylon's king. We don't know for sure, because he doesn't mention it, but it's possible that Daniel and his friends became eunuchs. Shattered dreams. Dreams of having a family is gone. Maybe dreams of wanting to get married, gone. Life for those sons definitely didn't turn out the way they dreamed. And here they are, a future lost. And if it doesn't get much worse, now they have to enter into a season that they don't want. It says in Daniel 1, 4 and 5, train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. And then it says they were to be trained for 3 years. Okay, Babylon has stolen everything from you. Everything was stolen. And now you want me to go to college for 3 years to study your customs, your traditions? You think they were very motivated? You think they felt like it? I'm sure they didn't feel like studying and training. I'm sure they wanted to quit. And yet this was the season they were dealt with. Sometimes you find yourself in a new season that you didn't pray for, you didn't want, you weren't interested in, but here you are, and you're faced with it. And then you have to enter into another season, and that is the war of your mind and your emotions. Because when you're going through stuff, there's another war that happens in your mind. And it said in Daniel 1, during the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim of Judah and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God. Here's where a mental war begins. Why does an evil king get to win? I mean, we're the servants of the Most High God. We're his priesthood. We're the ones he chose. Why does someone who's choosing to do what is evil, who does not worship our God, why does he get to win? Why does someone who's doing things that are dishonest, who are conquering people, who are doing evil things, why do they get to succeed? Why didn't I get to succeed? What did I do to deserve this? Why does this king get to gloat over me? You ever have someone gloat over you when they're winning? Chiefs fans? We've experienced gloating. So after games, people are getting fights, and you put a bunch of drunk people together, people who are, it's not a good equation. There's a lot of gloating when there's victories. Can you imagine the gloating that was going on? They're being taken away, they're being captive, people were being murdered. Where is your God? We serve the God of. Where's your God, Daniel? Where's your God? And then there's a whole war on your emotions. Were they angry? Of course they were angry. Some of those people were faced, I'm never going to have kids. I'm never going to be free. They had a war with anger. They had a war with bitterness. I hate Babylon. I hate that king. And they were going to have to war against bitterness. There would have to be a war against envy. Why were some people left behind? Why was I one of the ones that had to be a part of this? Why was I one of the ones that became a eunuch? Can you imagine the emotions you have to experience? And what I found is in the midst of hardship and tragedy, every person, every human will have a great war in your mind and your emotions. And it's in this place of all this stuff, this is where your calling can be found. It's in these moments, it's in these situations where you can actually find a calling and a new destiny to wake up in the morning. See, when you find yourself in this space, you can say this: I've experienced so much pain, and I'm going to make sure other people feel pain. I've been hurt, therefore other people are going to be hurt. And you can choose to let darkness become a part of who you are, and you can choose to become a villain. Or you can choose to take that same pain. You know, this pain that I've felt, this pain that I've experienced, I'm going to live my life making sure no one else ever has to experience pain like this. I'm going to make sure I can prevent this in the future for other people. And you can choose to become a person of light and choose to become someone who does the heroic things. We have an option to choose in all these situations, whether we're going to choose light or darkness. And it's here where Daniel's bravery begins to emerge. And when you read the book, you'll see a lot of situations where bravery emerges in Daniel's life. I'm I'm sure he was experiencing a lot of emotions, but he chose to be someone who was going to be someone of light, and someone who was going to choose to do what was heroic and what was brave. One of the things is when they were first taken into captivity, the verse that I shared, that the king said, you're going to come to the royal palace and we're going to feed you our food. And at the time, God wanted his people to be distinct from every other nation. He wanted his people to stick out. So there were certain dietary laws that God had for his people. It's because he wanted them to stick out. And so it says in Daniel 1:7-8, but Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. And he asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. Daniel was determined not to leave his convictions. Daniel was determined not to leave the way of God. And so he wages a bet. He gets his poker chips, and he puts them all in on God. And he asks this man, he says, listen, if you would, for 7 days, let us eat the food that we're accustomed to eating. For 7 days. And after the end of 7 days, let's just see, are we stronger and healthier than the other men who are eating the food that the king's giving? Will you please give us this opportunity? Now, obviously, the person who's in charge of this, they have orders from the king. So if they don't follow orders, they can get in trouble. But Daniel finds a boldness, and they say, okay, we'll do that. And after 7 days, Daniel and his friends were stronger and healthier than the others. Daniel stood to his convictions in that time. He stayed true to God. And in tragedy and in hardship, you can be determined to stay to your convictions, or you can deconstruct. You can unravel. You can start to doubt God. You can start to make excuses to say, you know what, God, I deserve this. I'm going to eat these foods. God, you haven't, look what I'm going through. I deserve to do this. And we can compromise, and we can choose things that we would never choose because we feel entitled. But Daniel would tell us to stay determined, to keep to your convictions, to keep to our convictions. You know, Daniel could have gotten bitter, but instead he chose to be humble and followed God. And what I love about Daniel's decision in Daniel 1 is when you're a person who displays courage, when you're a person who displays convictions, you know what it does to the people around you? Passes that courage on to them. That's why I love gathering together as a church and talking to each other and hearing our stories. Because oftentimes we're in situations where you might feel, I'm ready to give up. This seems too hard. And then you hear a story of someone who's been where you are, or has been there, and he says something to you and says an encouraging word. Like, okay, I can fight not another year, not another fight, maybe just another day, maybe just that afternoon. But when we choose courageous things in our convictions, we pass on courage to other people. And so later what happens is the king that took in all these people into exile, he sets up this big statue that he wants people to worship him. Well, this is going to be a problem to people who are following God because we don't worship any other gods. And so there's a situation where Daniel's 3 friends are faced with a choice. And in Daniel 3, they're reporting to the king. And they say, hey, but there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods or worship the image of gold you set up. These 3 men found courage because their friend led the way of courage. And on the opposite side of your courage and your courageous acts are other people who are watching. You don't even know who they are. We never know who they are, but that's what's fun. You never know who you're impacting, who you're passing on courage to. And what happened because of their bravery? Well, if you know the story, they stood up for what was true, and they were rewarded with money and cars and health. Prosperity. No, they actually were thrown into a fiery furnace. But it was in that furnace, by God's grace, he came through. And they looked and said, there's another person in that fire There's a fourth person in that fire, and that was God. And he protected them, and he saved them. And after he saved them, the people said, wow, their God, there's something to their God. It's an incredible story, an example of courage, inspiring others, and staying true to your convictions. So Daniel and his friends, it looks like they're winning, even though they're in some tough times. And so one king leads to another king. And there's a new king in town who doesn't know everybody. And so he makes another edict, and he says, prayer, you're not allowed to pray to your gods. So Daniel's now faced with another challenge, another conviction. You think his life would get easier by now, but it doesn't. And Daniel makes a decision, I'm still going to pray anyway. And he goes in front of his window and he prays. People see him, they come back to that king and say, hey, there's a guy, he's praying. So what does Daniel get for his courage? What does Daniel get because he chose to pray? A car, a wife, health. No, the king throws him in a lion's den to be eaten by lions. See, you do what's right, you get thrown into a furnace. You do what's right and you hold your convictions, you get thrown into a lion's den. None of those things are promised to us, but when his friends were thrown into that fire, they said, hey, we're never leaving our God. No matter what happens, we're going to stay true. And guess what? Even if we burn up right now, we're never going to turn away from God. And I think Daniel would say to us as he was sitting in that lion's den, by the way, he lives. He doesn't get eaten by the lions. And if you love stories of justice, which I'm sure you do, I know I do, the people that reported him, after Daniel survived the lion's den, the king was like, hey, this is a good guy. Who reported him? And they found the guys. Hey, we did. Why? Yeah, you're going in the lion's den. Before they even hit the ground, the Bible says the lions came up and mauled these people. Do not clap for that. Yeah, I wanted Patrick Mahomes to get hurt. I wanted Tom Brady to break his leg. If that's you, do not say it out loud. Let us believe that we are a community of people who are as patient as God, and we just want like a minor flu before the game and be sick, but that's it. But I think Daniel would say from the lion's den, hardships don't mean you've done something wrong. And hardships don't mean that God is not with you. And hardships don't mean God's not for you. But in the midst of hardship, Daniel would say to us, stay true to your convictions. Don't give up on God. Stay faithful. He is merciful. And what I do love about the story of Daniel is a guy who had every dream shattered would be given the gift to interpret dreams. One of the great things that God gave him is he gave Daniel the ability to interpret dreams. And Daniel earned favor in this kingdom. And when the king would have a dream, his people would be like, we can't interpret it. He'd be like, hey, tell me what my dream was. I don't know. What use are you? What good are you? And Daniel always rose up to the occasion and said, I can tell you the meaning of your dream. You might not like it, but I'm going to tell you what it is. And Daniel found favor, and God gave him the special ability to be able to tell the kings what their dreams were. And then when there was another king, think, Daniel's got to be free now. He's been faithful to God. He's been using his gift. Well, they didn't want to free Daniel. Why? They could interpret dreams. So the next king kept Daniel, and the next king. And then something happened. Babylon, they thought they were gloating and, we must be something. And God's like, no, I'm just kind of using you to discipline my thing. And I'm so tired of your gloating, someone's going to come conquer you now. And Babylon gets conquered by Persia. And then Persia. And Daniel must think this is it. I have been faithful all this time. Now Persia's in charge. Maybe now I get to be free. Maybe now I get to go back home. You know what happened to Daniel? He got released. He got to go home, built a house, started a family. No. Daniel never went home. He doesn't get a Hallmark ending. He stayed there. But what we learn from him is the real secret of success. See, the real secret of success is the heroes that help us the most are the ones who have been wounded and broken, and yet they found healing and strength. That's who's going to help you. The heroes that help us the most are the ones that have lost everything and can tell you, even though I lost, here's how my faith helped me through it. Here's how Jesus was just more than words on a page. This is how he helped me find strength and healing. And many of you are going to be able to help free a lot of other people. Not because you got the Hallmark ending, but because God helped you through a process that you were able to pass on to others that would help them find the strength and courage and healing that they were looking for. That's what's exciting about our faith. That's what we get to choose. Even if you were a victim of something, we get to choose to become a hero. And that's the calling we can all choose in every season and in every tragedy. And that's the calling I want to challenge everyone to. No matter where you find yourself, you can find great purpose, great calling every day you wake up. You can wake up fully alive, fully excited to whatever today comes. I know I'm going to be able to help some people. Whatever I'm going to face today, whatever tragedy I'm facing, I know. That doesn't mean you don't have anger and emotions and doubts. That's a part of the human experience, but we don't live there forever. And as the more you experience stuff, maybe it becomes shorter. So don't beat yourself up if you were sad that the Bills lost. Because you're going to be sad for a moment. I want to close with this. There really are victims, people who have been hurt, and I want you to know God is never okay with this. In fact, that's why I mentioned he had Babylon come, because there were people who were spiritual people, the nation of Israel. They were actually creating victims. They were choosing to do things and practices that were creating victims, and God's like, we're not having this. This ain't happening anymore. God's never okay with it. And God does have justice in his time. And I'm so glad that in God's justice, he was patient with me as I was choosing decisions, as we choose decisions that hurt other people. Because God is patient, not wanting anyone to perish. But at some point, he says enough. And that's why this cross is always up here. And that's why the cross is always central to every message and talk that we make. Because what God did to deal with evil is God placed judgment on a hero. And he became the villain that was punished. Jesus was the one who took on the punishment and the pain. He was the one that was mauled by lions. He was the one who suffered in our place. And that is the beauty of the gospel. It says in 2 Corinthians 5, for God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we may become the righteousness of God. Jesus became the villain, guilty against crimes against humanity. And we get to walk free, pardoned because of what he's done. So I'm going to have you bow your heads for a moment. Today, the first thing that you could do, we want you to walk out of here free from shame, free from your past, and connected to God in a way that you've never experienced before. And if you've never crossed that line of faith, if you've never made a decision to give your life and surrender your life to Jesus, then maybe right now in this moment you'd make a decision and say, Jesus, I give you my life. And in the book of Daniel, he has this long prayer that he says, and I'm going to use part of his prayer today. When he says in Daniel 9, he says, all this disaster has come on us, yet we have not sought favor of the Lord our God by turning from our sins and giving attention to your truth. I would encourage you this morning to cross that line of faith. Turn from your current way of life, turn from your sin, and turn to him. Let Jesus' truth become your truth. Let his way become your way. Receive the forgiveness he offers you right now. If that's you, just say this prayer. Make this vow. Determine in your heart right now, Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I'm giving you my life right now. I want to receive this new life you want to give me. And God, from this day forward, I'm going to choose to follow you, even if I fall forward. I'm going to choose your way of life, and your truth to guide me and guide my decisions. Not my own desires anymore, God, but your desires. Jesus, right now, I give you my life. God, I pray for every person. May you reveal yourself to them this morning in ways that only they will know you're real and you're true. May you have them experience their own ways of you come through the fire, their own versions of a lion's den where you come through and they know God is with me. God will never forsake me. God, I pray that for all the people who are listening this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.
So if you would stand with us, we're going to go into our response time. Our faith is active and alive, and it requires our action and our movement. So we're going to